Hello, everyone. I'm Tressie McMillan Cottom. I'm going to start with the Black feminist tradition practice, which I always like to do, which is I'm going to situate myself in my social location. So that means I'm going to tell you who I am and where I'm from. Then briefly, I'm going to tell you what I think is my big so what question. And that's the question that not only drives my academic work, but like my intellectual and emotional and affective passions. Then I'm going to tell you real quick about my current research projects, because then I really wanted to spend time telling you about the courses I'm developing for SILS and invite you into community with me to do that together. So if I've done this right, it fits into a nice, neat little puzzle. So first up, I'm a sociologist and a Southerner. I think both of those are important. I am primarily trained as a political economist of inequality. Now, this is what that means is I think about the context of things. In particular, the economic, the social, and the political context of things. So when we talk about an information-based society, being a political economist, I almost always start from the position of what politics produce this and what politics are produced by this. Where's the money? That's the economic piece. Follow the money. Where's the money? And then the social piece is where we usually try to figure out what groups get what based on those other things. So that's my approach. So similar to the great, W.B. Du Bois, who was also a sociologist, I believe that the color line is the defining social problem of a millennium. And since we didn't get around to solving it in the 20th century, we're still stuck with it in the 21st. And there goes me and my work. And like Patricia Hill Collins, another Black woman sociologist, I believe that we do best understanding social problems and inequality when we focus on the intersecting parts of a problem of different social locations. That means I'm really interested in race, class, and gender, y'all. Because I think that if you kind of focus on those intersections, you better understand the whole system. And again, my goal is usually to try to figure out the context of something. So that's very helpful. You should know that I write for both academic and public audiences. And so that's why my affiliation in the department is both in SILS and in the Center for Information Technology and Public Life. I'm, told I'll probably add a courtesy affiliation of sociology at some point too. So what that means for students is that when you take a course with me or we work together on a project, I'm probably going to be all about the context of a thing. So I'm going to be pushing you to usually think about who's here and who's missing. How do we better understand this if we change the context, problematize the context? So whether that's information or data or research question, I'm always going to be pushing on the issue of context. My big so what question is, how is inequality remade in our everyday institutions in an information society? All right. So when I say every day, that usually should be a signal you'll learn. It's a ding, ding, ding. That means I do something called mixed methods and qualitative methods to get at that, because it's a how question and it's a messy question. And I'm interested in mechanisms. And so usually a good place to start with that is by looking at both qualitative and quantitative data. It means talking to people, observing the volumes of text and discourse that we now produce in an information society. And again, thinking about the context of how that information is produced. I've got a new paper about racial capitalism and platform capitalism in the sociology of race and ethnicity, and that's not self-promotion. I promise you, I'm not that pitiful. I'm not yet anyway. I only bring it up because the paper informs a lot of my thinking right now, and you'll see it show up in my courses. And that is because I'm thinking about how much platforms introduce a set of economics and politics into how we socially consume information, right? And that when we do that, we're obviously also going to get ideas about racial hierarchy and racial inequality. And the challenge for me, my big driving so what right now is how do we identify what those social relations are? Where do we find them in our platforms? How do they reproduce racial inequality? And how does that, more importantly, shape people's lives and their life chances and mobility? And so my current projects are two things. I'm fudging there. It's probably more like 5 things, but that makes me sound like I'm all over the place. So I'm only going to talk about two. And the first one is that I am talking to Black women in what I call the hustle economy. Now, you might have heard it more like the gig economy, but I have a reason that I say hustling instead. That's because I want to tap into the history of how women in particular and women of color have worked in this country instead of focusing so narrowly on the last 20 years of changes in the labor market that tend to talk more about men being Uber drivers and et cetera. Well, women have hustled forever. It's looked like Tupperware parties. They've networked their labor forever, but we don't always take it seriously. So I'm looking at how Black women hustle on social media sites like Instagram. We've got a grant from Filene's, and we're working with the Data and Society folks to map out what hustling and making money looks like on these information platforms. So the apps that people use, the payment systems, and then we're going to think about, again, the politics and the social relations that get introduced because you're doing it on Instagram and not, for instance, doing it on Etsy. Like, what's the difference? Why would you do it on one versus the other? I think it's because people intuit at a gut level that one is more fair than another, or they're trying to get around some issue of unfairness, right? And in the case of the women that we talk to, what they're trying to get around is the more people know them, meaning they get more visual cues to their personality, the less likely they are to racially discriminate in their pricing. So we have tons of information that says when a person assumes or has an indicator that someone is Black on, say, Etsy or another auction site like eBay, they devalue the value of what that person is selling. And I think that what's happening is the hustle economy is women and women of color trying to get around that by wrapping it up in personality and branding. So we're working on that project, interviewing folks. My other one is thinking about how we consume information and how that shapes our racial identities. I think there's something about the way we buy stuff and consume information that's deeply embedded in how we act out our racial identity. So my current example of this is the women melting down in Trader Joe's because they have to wear a mask, right? So we've all seen these videos. I think there's a reason why that happens in Trader Joe's and not, say, in a public park or on a corner. I think there's something about what we consume that introduces a set of ideas about how we're supposed to be able to consume that are wrapped up in our identity as a racialized person. So I'm working on a book about that, the cultural industries that women dominate in. I'm focusing on health and wellness industries. And the working title for that book right now is White Lady Camps. And so if you ever see me around, ask me why I call it that. Because it's a funny story about how one time I went to White Lady Camp. And I will finish off by telling you about the two courses I'm thinking about for SILS. I think I've got my time just right because I'm inviting students in particular to help me build these together. The courses should work for you, and they should also push our understanding of our big so what questions. The first one is because of my role in CITAP, we're going to be thinking about what public life means and how information plays out in public life. This is going to be like a writing-based course, but I'm really interested in us figuring out the role of publics and how we interrogate who is a suitable public for what kinds of information. So we'll be interrogating like the ecosystem of like hot takes and essays that are designed to move public discourse and what they mean and who gets to participate in them. That means we'll be doing a lot of writing and talking about writing and how the platform shapes the publics and who we're able to talk to. What does it mean to talk to somebody on Twitter as opposed to op-ed pages in the New York Times, for example? And the second one is a race course, but we are going to be focusing on the next few years anyway in that course in trying to build a public-facing syllabus for how to study race and racism in an information-based society. So to do that, we're going to start by reading the dominant theories of race and racial inequality from the social science literature, but we're also going to do a lot of investigative work to find new and emerging sources and put together both an empirical and theoretical program for studying race and inequality in the information society. That's what I do. If you see me around, talk me out of getting a dog, know that you can always email me, and there's a link in my email address to put yourself on my calendar if you'd ever like to talk. And I've got 13 seconds left, and I yield my time.